And we will go ahead and get started for the sake of time. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. My name is Brianna Mosier with the Flint and Genesee Group. I serve as a liaison between our organization and the Disability Works Committee. If you're not familiar with the committee, the goal of this committee is to serve businesses and residents of Genesee County as a primary resource of information pertaining to the employment, training, or accommodations for people with disabilities. The Disability Works Committee includes small business owners, mid-sized corporations, and civic organizations that care about individuals with physical or mental challenges, yet are capable of becoming the next best employee you've ever hired, which we're very excited to get into today. A couple of quick things before we get started. As I mentioned, but if you're just joining, this is being recorded, and we'll be sure to share out the recording with everyone who's here today. I want to give a big thanks to our sponsors of the event, the Disability Network, MRS, and the Disability Works Committee. Feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat at any time. We would love to engage with you throughout this presentation. A quick run of show, we're going to have Luke Zelley come up first. He's the president and CEO of the Disability Network Flint. A few of his team members will be joining to talk about workplace accommodations. And then we also have Tracie from MRS joining to speak more about their resources for employers. So let me go ahead and bring up Luke. Luke, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Brianna. And this is a really exciting time. October is a national recognized month where employers and folks all across the nation are putting a spotlight on people with disabilities and an untapped talent pool. It's for folks with disabilities. They really want the same thing as everybody else, that pursuit of the American dream. It is being productive, contributing, being part of a workplace that's inclusive. It's stuff that we all want. So in some ways, there's really nothing unique about what people with disabilities bring to work. We do know study after study for the past 50 years show that people with disabilities are great employees. They're more productive. They have less time off. They retain and stay at work longer. They make great employees. So part of today is just kind of demystifying or kind of removing some of these biases and putting a spotlight on, man, how can we really have a great workforce that's productive? How can we tap into this population? And gosh, in Genesee County, there are 20,000 people with disabilities who are not working and they want to work. So today we're going to be learning some tools, got some great speakers, some resources that are available for hiring and accommodating and tapping into this great talent pool. And Brianna, I know you already thanked folks, so I'll just go right back to you at the chamber. Like, thank you for the support for the Disability Works Committee and the leadership there at the chamber and putting a spotlight on this in October for employers. Because the other side of the coin is there are employers right now who are desperate for employees. They're looking for talent out there. And if you can get this message right and you can get these tools and resources in place, you can get a ton of folks with disabilities who will be knocking at your door and wanting to work. So thank you, Chamber. Michigan Rehab Service, Tracie Lewis-Jennings and her team, they are a local champion for hiring folks with disabilities, lots of resources on finding and accommodating, which you'll learn about today. And our Disability Network staff, like our team. You're going to hear from Jessica and Besh, not only just their lived experience and tools and resources, but they're going to walk you through and just be really authentic in a very cool way. And I guess the last person I would thank is just you, everybody who's on the call today or this training today. Like, you showed up, you're here, you're open and want to learn. I always find when we do these trainings that there's some good things that you can put up front to just try and create an environment that's open for learning. And what I would say is just, it's having three things, like respect for the folks who are on the call today. There may be employers who hire tons of people with disabilities, and so they're looking for some new tools. There may be folks that have never hired folks with disabilities, and they're kind of curious about what's going on. And there may even be folks who are participating that have had the worst possible experience with folks with disabilities, that it didn't turn out, or they didn't know how to make accommodations. It just didn't feel right. All of those are valid experiences. And so today we're just going to meet you where you're at. We're going to provide some tools so you can kind of move up towards that first employer experience that is really confident and leveraging employees today and having a good experience. The second thing, it's kind of hard when it's being recorded, but confidential. You can put messages in. You can do private messages in Zoom. So if there's a question that you want asked and you're not comfortable raising your hand or saying it, please do message it. And we'll have contact information at the end if you wanted to reach out people who are on this training session today to have a confidential conversation. So that's important so that people feel comfortable and ask the questions that they really need to answer on. And then the last one, I would just say, be brave, be bold, engage, ask those questions, because I think we have a great team of folks that have just decades of experience. Tracie Lewis-Jennings has been doing innovation and working with businesses and really unique programs for years. It's a great chance to pick her brain and our team also on available resources. So I think with that, we've got a couple of videos that we can show, because you might expect, the Chamber, the Disability Network, Michigan Rehab Services to tell you how great hiring folks with disabilities are. We know it, we live it every single day, but really, a lot of times the best and most trusted voices are other employers. So Kara or Brianna, I'm hoping you can help show these videos of a couple of local employers. We've got Universal Coding that is sharing kind of what it's like in their business and highlighting an employee with a disability. And then MTA and Ed Benning, just really explaining why they hire folks with disabilities. So I guess with that, we can just roll the tape, maybe.
Inside the sprawling Universal Coating factory, there are workers who aren't afraid to get a little dirty. It's what's called a third-tier auto supplier. It coats aluminum or steel with rubber. On this day, workers were churning out cab mounts for the GM trucks that are assembled on Van Slyke Road. Michael Johnson is one of the workers here.
Oh, yeah, I was racing motorcycles in 2005, and I ended up breaking my back, and I'm paralyzed from the mid-chest down.
The result left Johnson using a wheelchair, but his love of racing never wavered. When he's not working here, he's a race car driver with his own team. The resulting publicity has given Johnson confidence on the job. He encourages other employers to consider workers with disabilities.
The thing I would tell other employers is to give future employees a chance. You never know what type of person that they may be or what kind of worker they'll be, but give them a chance and trust that you will find the workers that you need.
The former Frankenmuth High School student feels employers may not realize the benefits of hiring someone with a disability.
I think it's really special that they're willing to hire people with disabilities. That shows what kind of moral stance that they have and really accommodating to the general public.
One of the managers here says they don't refer to workers with disabilities as them or those. They're just part of what makes Universal Coding a great place to work.
Hey, nice meeting you.
On this day, Devin Brooks stopped by looking for a job.
I figured I couldn't get employed into other jobs because, well, my disability works, but that's the whole reason why I wanted to come here, since I had a chance.
Brooks says he won't let an Asperger's diagnosis stop him from earning a living. His advice for employers?
Well, say just give them a chance. Man, you gotta just guide them and make sure they're doing the right things the right way and they're not messing up in any way or capacity. That's what I would say.
Brooks was helped by officials from Michigan Rehabilitation Services, or MRS. It's a state agency that provides employment services to help teens and adults with disabilities find a job. The Disability Network also helps people find work. Companies like Universal Coding are leading the way by intentionally accessing and recruiting people with disabilities to further enhance their workforce. I'm Joel Fike.
as a employer, we're always looking for individuals that can fill our positions and bring to it the dedication and commitment that we need. We don't look at individuals whether or not they have a disability. We look at what abilities they have and how that best fits our needs. Now, some areas it doesn't work well because of the nature of that disability. Today, we have individuals with disabilities that are driving our vehicles, that it's a good fit for them. And we have individuals that work in our vault and count our money. And when you fill these jobs with people that happen to have a disability, you don't have that turnover.
What advice would you have for other businesses who might consider hiring someone with a disability but might be a little fearful of the unknown?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is get rid of the idea of the disability. Look at what you need, find people that can fill those needs. The fear of the unknown is always difficult for people. They may just find that there's an opportunity here that could make their business a much better business for a long time.
Hey, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm so grateful the technology worked. I think you can take away from that your own experience and your own lens. Some of the things that I tend to see in that is that fear. You might see somebody in a wheelchair, and could they really work here? And that's a common bias that people may have. And you saw what that universal coding looked like, and they're finding ways to accommodate people. And what frequently happens is one person with a disability sees another person with a disability having a great experience at an employer, and they start lining up and wanting to apply. And then I think finally, just Ed Bennings, that you'll hear it today. It's not about the disability. It's really about the need that you have, trying to find that talent and then matching it or accommodating it. And it's true. People with disabilities tend to stay at their jobs, have less turnover, and are way more productive. And part of it is because of those accommodations. So we're going to hear a little bit about that next. I'm going to have Jessica from the Disability Network, and Besh go ahead and jump on in.
All right, so my name is Besh, and go ahead, Jess, are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was muted. I'm so sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica, and I'm happy to be here and unmuted now.
All right, I think I have my screen shared, everyone. Jessica, are you go?
Yeah, you're all set.
All right. So Jessica and I are going to talk about reasonable accommodations in the workplace and demystifying them to add to your talent pool at work. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be big and scary. We're gonna talk about sort of the basics of reasonable accommodations in the workplace. They can and are easy to make in the workplace. And so Jessica and I are gonna talk a little bit about that. Just to tell you a little bit more about myself, throughout my career, I've been in the employment field over a decade now, I believe. And out of that decade, I worked for a mid-sized company in HR. And so dealt with this kind of thing semi-regularly. And so employment is something that is enjoyable for me, and I like this subject. So yeah, Jessica, do you want to say anything? Or okay?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
All right. As Luke pointed out earlier, the world is run by those who show up, and we showed up today. Thank you for being here and participating in our presentation today. And I'm going to share with you this little quote here never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And when you look at the disability movement, the history of the disability movement, it started with just a few people asking about things like accommodations and making the world more accessible for them to be able to lead maximally independent lives, whatever that means to them, right? And so that is the meaning behind that.
All right, so I'm just gonna go over our goals today. There's 3 goals here. One, we're gonna we want you all to rethink what accommodations look like in the workplace for persons with disabilities. Number 2, we're gonna talk about the accommodation process and the fact that when you're working with an employee, a person with a disability who is an employee, it's an interactive process. And we're gonna talk about that process, kind of break it down so that you understand that. And the goal number 3 is just give you additional resources and places to point you to for support as you're going through the process of accommodating an employee with a disability.
Great. And so we just wanted to start off really quick with an informal poll. If you would like to answer, feel free to put it in the chat. Have you or someone at your work ever received a reasonable accommodation? There is no wrong answer, yes or no. And I suppose if you don't wish to participate, just don't put anything in the chat. And so if you would please, I know I have. And
Same
I'll just,
here.
yep. And go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a resounding yes, which is amazing. Which is amazing.
Wonderful. I know I've asked for a few in the workplace. One of them had to do with ergonomics and the fact that I have spina bifida and have mobility issues. And so sitting in certain ways is more comfortable for me. And so I've asked for that, and it wasn't a big deal. Not a big deal at all. All right.
So the overall kind of theme or arching question that we want to be able to answer today or talk about today is, what if we could change how people think about disability itself and accommodations? And one of the things that I think we want to be cognizant of, because the focus today is on accommodation side of things, is also the fact that disabilities are both seen and hidden. You know, a lot of people that are new to the disability community and disability world tend to think of people who have seen disabilities, whether it be a wheelchair user, a person who is deaf or hard of hearing. And the truth of the matter is a lot of disabilities are hidden. So they're not easily seen or known. And so really, it's also about understanding and knowing that you probably already have people in your workforce that work for you that are persons with disabilities, and those people may or may not need an accommodation for their disability.
Wonderful. It's not advancing for some reason. There we go. And we just want to talk a little bit about what the ADA is not and accommodation myths. Myth 1, the ADA forces businesses and government to spend lots of money hiring unqualified people. That totally is a myth. You do not have to hire somebody if they're not qualified to do the essential functions of the job. Myth 2, accommodating workers with disabilities costs too much. And you'll see later that it really doesn't boil down to dollars and sense a lot of the time, and the costs associated with it monetarily are most of the time very reasonable. And so that's definitely a myth. Number 3, the ADA places a financial burden related to number 2 on small businesses that cannot afford to make accommodations for individuals with disabilities. And, they place that word in the law for reasonable accommodations. If it's an undue burden, if it's something that, for example, the Disability Network would not be able to accommodate me in being $10 million that I'm asking for to accommodate me to purchase something, it's probably not going to be reasonable. So number 4, the ADA is frequently misused by people with vague complaints or diagnoses, and that's definitely a myth also. You really have to be able to pin down what your specific disability is and what kinds of accommodations need or should be made that are reasonable in order for you to be able to perform that job. It can't be something, I can't even think of something right now, but like just something that really is, it's not related to my spina bifida. It's not related to my mobility at all. It's just kind of a feeling of malaise that I have all the time that I can't really pin down, that you can't really accommodate for. It really needs to be talked about specifically and given a specific kind of reasonable accommodation. Number 5, under the ADA, an employer cannot fire an employee who has a disability. That definitely is not true. You can fire somebody at any time with or without a disability if they are not doing their job very well, and as long as it's not related to anything discriminatory, you'll be all right. And so that's definitely a myth.
I think I just want to add, Besh, I think myth number 5 is definitely one that comes up a lot for people. And you're spot on with saying it's really about, the performance of the employee, whether they have a disability or not. And if it is a person with a disability, and an accommodation might be what they need in order to correct that performance issue, then that's definitely a conversation in starting that process of accommodation. But even after which you put an accommodation in for that person with a disability, if performance is still lacking and you've tried all corrective actions, then it might not, kind of like Ed said in the video, it might not be a good fit. Not everyone is a good bus driver. So I just want to add to that point.
Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Jess.
Yes. So let's talk about rethinking disability accommodations. For every dollar that a business spends on an accommodation for an employee, the business actually saves money. So that's money back in their pocket. And that money could be saved in various ways. It could be saved with workers' compensation, so the person isn't being injured. It could help save in training and productivity, absolutely. It also could save at the bottom line of you don't have to hire somebody else to do it. You provided the accommodation and the person is well on their way to moving forward and getting the job done. The average cost of accommodation, I'd like to think that a large majority of accommodations don't actually cost close to nothing, but here we put down that the average cost of an accommodation is less than $200. Besh, you mentioned earlier, you have asked for accommodations on the job regarding ergonomics, like chairs or desks, and those things aren't that expensive. And so those are real world examples of that. Another big thing when you're thinking about having to accommodate people with disabilities at your place of employment, 85% of people using an accommodation work faster and earn more money. So if you are providing an accommodation to people, it's actually at the benefit of you, the employer. And only 15% of people with disabilities are born with a disability. So what we're saying here is that 85% of people with a disability acquire that, meaning there are people that currently work with you that may have with time or situations acquired some sort of disability, or they may be down the road acquiring it. And so just, thinking about accommodations as an investment in them, you've invested within them all this time as your employee, and you want to keep them around. So providing an accommodation can do that. You don't have to worry about hiring and training a new person. Really, accommodations help with job retention and keeping the people that can do the job.
Great. And there are other direct benefits to creating reasonable accommodations for your employees. One is, Jessica just pointed to this, you've retained a valued employee. That person does a good job for you. And so retaining that person is important. Increasing the employee's productivity, like we said earlier. And so it really contributes to your bottom line when you're able to work with that person in a good way and provide them that reasonable accommodation, because their productivity more often than not will increase. Eliminated costs associated with training a new employee, just sort of the converse of retaining a valued employee, keeping someone on and not having to put in for training costs again on your budget. Increasing that employee's attendance. We've observed that the employees' attendance goes up because they, now have it within their sort of employment history and relationship with you that you have valued them, you have provided that reasonable accommodation, and so they want to come to work, they want to be there, they want to be productive. Increasing the diversity of your company, and so that is sort of a very good outcome of a reasonable accommodation. Saving workers' compensation or other insurance costs. We talked about that a little bit before. Hiring a qualified person with a disability. And last but certainly not least, promoting an employee. Promoting an employee, allowing that person, or working with that person, I should say, to provide them a reasonable accommodation when you've promoted them is something that is a benefit.
So the indirect benefits. So this is benefits to not only the employee with a disability, but just to the workplace, the culture, and the employer overall. Just to touch a few, increases safety. I'm going to do what Luke was saying earlier, give you a real world example. So, and this isn't really for the job, but on the job, in our bathroom, in our women's bathroom, the paper towel holder was on the other side of the room once you washed your hands. And I was so scared of falling with wet hands as I made my way over to the paper towel holder that I asked if we could move it closer to the sink so that I wasn't walking on wet floors to get to dry my hands. And the answer, of course, was yes. It just made sense, actually. And so that's a place where It helped me be safe at work while, being able to access the restroom. And I think it makes everyone safe, whether they have a disability or not. I think what's important in this is increased overall company attendance because it's a known fact that people with disabilities are good at coming to jobs, staying on the job, giving it 110%. And I think that kind of trickles down to our peers and to people that see how hard we work. So again, these are just a few indirect benefits.
All right. So we're gonna watch this short 4-minute video that kind of breaks down reasonable accommodations a little bit further. And I know that I have to stop sharing my screen. It's not going to be exactly seamless. Just bear with me for a second, please.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. It undermines the writer's message, and the word choice is bland. Grammarly's cutting-edge technology helps you craft compelling, understandable writing that makes an impact on your reader. Much better. Are you ready to give it a try? Installation is simple and free. Visit Grammarly. Everyone needs the right tool.
I was
Okay.
gonna say, this is where that commercial is helpful. It gives you the opportunity to transition.
Yeah, right. Sorry about this. I knew this was going to happen though.
To perform a job.
Can you see my screen, Jess?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me just back it up here.
Everyone needs the right tools to perform a job. Chairs for employees who work at desks, ladders for roofers who need to get on top of a house, even lunch breaks for people who need food to get through the day, like we all do. It makes good business sense to have a workplace that accommodates everyone's needs. And laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, and the Rehabilitation Act are there to make sure workers with disabilities are accommodated too. So, what kind of accommodations are we talking about? Special privileges for special people, right? Gold-plated hover chairs? Trained seeing eye unicorns? Not even close. Turns out employees with disabilities aren't particularly special, and neither are the accommodations they need to do their jobs. In fact, they're pretty reasonable. Literally, it's why the ADA calls them reasonable accommodations. An accommodation is any change in the environment or in the way things are done that enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal opportunities to work. Miguel works as an office assistant, and his low vision makes using a computer monitor difficult. So his employer provided screen reading software that reads aloud on-screen text and image descriptions. That's a reasonable accommodation. June is a bookkeeper who experienced a traumatic brain injury. Concentrating for long periods of time is exhausting for her. So instead of taking one long break, her employer allows her to take several short breaks. That's a reasonable accommodation. And according to the Job Accommodation Network, JAN, the majority of workplace accommodations, 59%, cost absolutely nothing. But if there is an expense, there are tax credits and other incentives out there to support businesses in creating a more accessible workplace. So how do you go about getting a reasonable accommodation? You're the expert on what you need. So if you need something, ask for it. Step 1. Research simple solutions. While you may be the only employee at your job with your disability, odds are that someone somewhere has a solution you're looking for. Resources like JAN have whole catalogs of useful real-life solutions to learn from. Step 2, notify your employer. Notifying your employer of your need for an accommodation starts the process, whether you speak with them or send them an email. You may need to provide a medical letter or other documentation if requested. You do not need to tell your employer everything about your disability, just how it might affect your job duties. Step 3, negotiate. Finding the right accommodation is not a one-step process. It's an interactive back and forth conversation. Your employer may propose a different accommodation than the one you suggested. Consider whether their idea would be effective. or make another suggestion. And you may need to propose more than one accommodation before finding the one that works for everyone. Step 4, approach a higher level colleague. If your employer rejects your requested accommodation without making an alternative offer, or if your employer refuses to discuss your request, communicate your request to a higher level individual, like your supervisor's manager or the HR department. It is a good idea to keep notes about who you spoke with and the date. If all else fails, there's step 5, file a claim. If you're not getting anywhere with the higher ups, there are agencies that can help. Filing a claim involves a lot of paperwork and sometimes short deadlines, so it's important to move quickly. No matter what steps you take, always remember that asking for reasonable accommodations is not about getting special favors. It's about getting what you need to get your job done. For more information, contact Disability Rights Florida at 800-342-0823 or disabilityrightsflorida.org. Produced by Rooted in Rights.
All right, let me get back to where
Job
we were.
Accommodation
Oh
Network.
boy.
Practical Solutions Workplace Success. 800-526-7234. Voice. 877-781-9403.
Sorry about that, my friends.
And we're on side 11.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
You are most welcome. So let's talk about who is actually eligible for a workplace accommodation. And what's most important is the ADA lays this out, is the individual has to be a person with a disability. So they have to have a disability that is qualified under the ADA. And again, that can look different based on a person's disability. So it could be someone who needs ergonomics for their back, right? Or it could be an extended lunch break for a person with diabetes, or maybe a scheduled same time every day lunch break for a person with diabetes. But the second prong of who's eligible under the ADA is the person also has to be a qualified person for the position that they're in, meaning that in order to be able to continue to or do the essential functions of the job, they're asking for that accommodation. So in this example too, it's important to know that a person may acquire a disability, which most people do. And so when it comes to maybe because of the disability now, they can no longer perform those essential functions, that's where the accommodation kind of comes in and helps support the person with a disability, and seeing if they can continue to do that job. And if they cannot with the accommodation, then that further is a discussion about what would be the best fit moving forward for that person.
Great. And Jess just talked about what a reasonable, or who is eligible for reasonable accommodation. And I'm going to talk about what is a reasonable accommodation. Any change or adjustment to the job, the work environment, or the way work is done, which permits a qualified applicant or employee with a disability to, 1, perform the essential functions of a job, and 2, enjoy the equal benefits of employment as are available to employees without a disability. And so just kind of pointed at this on her slide, has to be a qualified applicant, definitely. Just by way of the fact that I have spina bifida does not qualify me to be an employment specialist at the Disability Network in and of itself. I came to the Disability Network with some experience under my belt in the employment field in order to know a little bit about what I'm talking about when I'm working with folks on their employment endeavors. And so I was able, coming into the position, to perform the essential functions of the job. If I was needing to, for whatever reason, and we deemed this to be a reasonable accommodation, let's say I asked for to be able to work from home 2 days a week or something like that. And in order to enjoy the equal benefits of employment as other people at my place of employment, like, for example, taking advantage of training and development that is going on at the Disability Network, it's probably a reasonable accommodation to allow me to, or to work with me on being able to participate virtually. You know, training and development is a very important part of anybody's position, and being able to advance in their position, and that sort of thing. And so I'd say that that would be a reasonable accommodation. Wouldn't you say, Jess?
I would.
All right.
I know we're close to the 15-minute mark, and I know that Tracie from MRS has some things she'd like to say as well. So we're gonna try to move a little bit more quickly through this because I'm cognizant of time. So we talked about the who, we talked about the what. I'm gonna talk about when. When can a reasonable accommodation be asked or requested? And the answer is anytime within the process of just even starting to apply for or go to an interview on a job. So a person with a disability can ask for an accommodation when it comes to maybe they're hard of hearing or deaf and they need an interpreter for the interview. It can be asked of when you have the job and you're needing support with the essential functions and performance of the job. And also, it's just anytime, any point, like I said, in the receipt of all benefits of employment. So just the example I gave, I think of moving the teledispenser, that's, you know, that's here at the job. So that's somewhere where I have to be in the environment to be able to do my job. So anywhere within the job function and the job environment, you can ask for accommodations.
Examples of reasonable accommodations. We talked a little bit earlier, allow a flexible work schedule or working from home. Improving accessibility in a work area, modifying the layout of a work area. I know my desk, I have one of those desks that raises and lowers depending on if I need to stand up or feel like I need to sit down for a while, and so it's versatile. Providing or adjusting a product, equipment, or software. Changing job tasks or the structure of a job, changing testing or training materials or policies. An example would be making materials accessible, allowing somebody or working with somebody to have a service animal present, and food at someone's desk. Jessica talked about somebody with diabetes. They might need to eat something really quick depending on their sugar levels. And then I used to work for government. This used to happen quite regularly, reassigning somebody to a vacant position. The things that Jessica and I touched on earlier also apply to this situation. They obviously need to be qualified for that position and ready to hit the ground running in that sort of way, but that's also something that could be a reasonable accommodation.
I agree. So when it comes to unreasonable accommodations, so these are things that as an employer, You do not have to provide necessarily when it comes to a person asking for an accommodation. It does not mean that you change the job description. It does not mean that you change the production standards if you have those at your office or your organization. It also means that you don't always have to provide items for the person with a disability. Here we have a little prompt that says prosthetics or hearing aids. The person with a disability should be able to provide those kind of things for themselves or work with in partnership with places like MRS to get those needs met for their disability. We've already kind of covered anything considered an undue hardship. And last but not least, but most important, you're not to provide accommodations to any person with a disability, because you wouldn't provide an accommodation to a person without a disability if it related to any kind of violence or, unsafe behavior or anything like that. So those are just examples of where accommodation is not necessary or unreasonable.
And the interactive process, this is kind of what the video touched on, just sort of the process that a company or organization might go about in order to work with a person to provide a reasonable accommodation. One is recognizing that the accommodation requests exists, and that would take the employee probably approaching the employer and talking about that accommodation related to their disability, gathering information about that. And that might be, and we'll see in, I think it's the next slide, there's a form that you could create and utilize in order to gather information about that particular accommodation that's being requested, talking with your employer about the accommodation options, and your supervisor putting some things on the table. You maybe, as the employee, talking about what you've had in the past for accommodations and what's worked for you, and then zeroing in on what exactly that accommodation might be. Putting the accommodation in place, monitoring the accommodation just to make sure that everything is going great, and that last one, I forget what it is, and the ribbon is in my way. Can you see it, Jessica?
It just says that it's been a successful accommodation.
Okay, great.
I will add that this interactive process is very, 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 very individualized. So even if you have two people with the same disability or similar disabilities, it is not a template. Well, oh, we provided that to Besh. Jessica, you're kind of asking for the same thing, so here's what we're going to do for you. The process is very individualized for each person with the disability. I just want to add that little tidbit as Besh kind of ran through it. On the next slide, what Besh was talking about, when it comes to gathering information, a lot of employees and employers get a little nervous around employees say, how much do I have to disclose about my disabilities? And employers say, what can I ask? And this is a form off of JAN, the Job Accommodation Network website. I'm going to be putting that link in the chat in just a few minutes. But Jan has this template for walking through a reasonable accommodation. And this is both for the employer and the employee to kind of go through together. And your own organization may already have one, your HR department. So again, there are tools out there if you need it, or your HR department might already have those tools in place.
All right. And so we wanted to point out and to say that, historically, everything employers and people with disabilities have been told is do not ask and do not tell. 66% of employees with disabilities do not disclose that they have a disability. And so I would be willing to bet that everybody here at different points in their career, maybe everywhere you've ever worked, you've probably worked with somebody that had a disability or multiple people that had disabilities and they just didn't disclose. Maybe they didn't feel it was necessary because they didn't need a reasonable accommodation, or maybe they felt uncomfortable for some other reason. But I just wanted to point out again what Jess was saying earlier. There's hidden disabilities and visible disabilities. I happen to have both a visible and hidden disability. And so, there have been employers in my background and in my history where I've talked about one and not the other. It's my choice. And so just wanted to point that out.
Lastly, when it comes to why people choose to disclose, so Beth was talking about majority, and historically it's been a big no. But the reasons why people tend to disclose is the top three are there. They have a really good relationship with their supervisor. It's a disability-friendly workplace, and that has a lot to do with culture. And they're actively recruiting people with disabilities. So I think Luke pointed out this at the beginning of the presentation, when one person with a disability happens to frequent a business and sees a person with a disability working there, they themselves might think themselves, maybe I could work here. So these are just the top three. There's other ones here that you can see as well that help employers and places of employment to be more accommodating to people and know that they can ask for accommodations.
And we're getting to the end here, so we just wanted to, and we're going to make sure that we send this information out on this particular slide. These are key partners and resources and organizations that you can utilize that deal with accommodations in the workplace. The Great Lakes ADA Center, the Job Accommodation Network, and of course, Michigan Rehabilitation Services.
Which I will point out, both Besh and I are former clients of.
Yeah.
So I outed you, Besh.
Yes.
We are former customers, clients, beneficiaries of Michigan Rehab Services. So I will pass it over to Tracie.
I think my stop share. Okay, so wait. There we go. Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I want to say what a great presentation. And I want to start with really saying thank you to the Chamber for allowing us to have this opportunity as we look at the National Disability Awareness Month. And Besh and Jessica, your presentation was spot on. You did an amazing job. And everything has mentioned MRS. And I'm Tracie Lewis-Jennings, and I am the district manager of the Eastern District, which covers the six counties of the thumb. And we, vocational rehabilitation, we are a network throughout the state that provides creative solutions in working with businesses to give them disability awareness, as well as acquisition for talent. And we have the privilege of working with individuals to help them refine those abilities and see that potential that they have in working. And so I realize we're kind of short on time here, but I just wanted to let you know that Michigan Rehabilitation, we served 11,590 individuals in the state of Michigan. And out of those, we had 5,000, over 5,000 who had an opportunity to find employment. And one of the other divisions that we have is our business network division. And we're so fortunate to have Gene Bommarito, who is our business relations consultant, who works really close with businesses to provide them an array of services. And I just kind of wanted to let you know, when we talk about that, we talk about acquisition of services. We talk about the disability awareness. And I don't know if Gene can say anything at this point, but I just wanted to point out, we also have occupational therapists. that work with businesses, and some of the services that they provide are assistive technology evaluations. We talked about the ADA evaluations and consults. We have ergonomics and body mechanics training. We have return to work of injured workers and job retention. We have, again, Gene, who would be able to work with businesses to look at doing job analysis, working with those job descriptions, just talking about the ADA and all. And I think I see Gene there. Gene, can you just, is there anything that I missed as we're rounding out here?
I think you've covered pretty much it. The principal services that our agency provides is accommodation of workers, retention of workers, providing sourcing new candidates for businesses and acquisition, our consulting services, and all of the ADA type assessments that our occupational therapists can provide, worksite accommodation assessments, and that kind of thing. So those are the principal service delivery, and I think Tracie, you've done a good job of speaking to them. I'm putting my contact information in the chat, and people are welcome to contact me. I've provided my phone number there, businesses or individuals, and we can have a dialogue. So thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And I think the last thing that I want to say is it's so good to be a part of disability, the Disability Works Committee here in Genesee County. We all work together to make sure we have an inclusive workforce. And we start even with Michigan Rehab with students in high school to get them a career exploration. TDN is right there with us all the way, making sure that we're giving everyone the tools that they need to be really successful and getting competitive and integrated employment. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Luke. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Tracie and the MRS team. They just recently celebrated their 100th year anniversary. They've been around forever doing this, so nobody does it better. Brianna, I know we're short on time, so I would just make sure for the folks that are on the call or who are maybe watching this later, take action. Pick up the phone, give a call to the Chamber of Commerce, engage Disability Works. If you're looking for employees or you're struggling to retain employees, MRS, the Disability Works, it's a great resource. So Brianna, I just want to thank again the Chamber for hosting. If there are folks that do have questions, I know the slides will go out. They're welcome to reach out to any of the presenters here today.
Yes, I didn't see any questions come through during the presentation, but like you said, all of this information will be made available. I've been recording it, so I will make sure that everyone receives it so that we can all continue to do our part in spreading this message beyond October and Disability Employment Awareness Month. All of the resources that have been placed in the chat, I saved those too, so I'll create a little one-pager for everyone to refer back to, but at this time, we're right up on the hour. If anyone has any questions, now is the time. And if not, feel free to follow up with any of our speakers following this presentation. Okay, looks like we are all set. Thank you guys so much for spending your afternoon with us. Jessica and Besh, great job today. Tracie and your team, thank you for joining us. And as always, the Disability Network, thank you for the partnership and sharing the great message today.
Brianna, Chris had his hand up for just a second. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Chris, I missed that.
He needs to unmute.
Is it a hand? I think it's a clap.
It's a clap.
Oh, it's a clap. Hey,
all
wonderful.
right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.